Our colors are looking a little bit better now, but I think we can get a little bit more impact out of our scene if we add a little bit more highlight and color variation, and we can do that using gradients. Now, gradients are also accessed through the color picker menu. So let me switch tools here real quick. I'll go over to my normal selection tool, and I'm just going to select this left hillside to work with. If we have an image selected when we change the colors in the color palette, the color will automatically update on the object. Now up here at the top you can see that we've been working in solid color, but if we pull down this menu, we have choices of gradients as well. I'm just going to choose a linear gradient to start off with, and it's dropped me into a default gradient that's a ramp of color going from black over to white, and you can see that the black to white gradient has already been applied to the hill. We can modify the gradients pretty easily. All the control is done with these color chips down at the bottom. So let's say I wanted to do a light green to dark green gradient. I could click on the first color chip, and we'll just adjust that color out to a nice medium to light green. And I'll click on the second color chip, and we'll adjust that one to kind of a nice dark green. Once again, you can see that the changes are already appearing on the selected object on the stage, and we can play around with it as much as we want. You can add more colors to the gradient by simply clicking where you want to add another chip. This chip works like the first two. You can just adjust the color. Let me put in a strange one. I'm going to go light green to blue now. And you can see that my gradient updates accordingly. If you want to remove a color from a gradient, just grab a hold of the chip, click on it, and pull down, and it'll disappear. Now, in addition to linear gradients, we also have a selection of a radial gradient. This is simply the same thing. I've got the same ramp going from light to dark, but now it's starting from a central point and radiating outward towards the darkness on the edge. You can see over in the color settings that my gradient has actually been applied as a fill color right now. And just like with the other colors that we select, we can save gradient swatches if we want to reuse them again. I'll switch over to my swatches palette, and since the gradient is my currently selected color, if I go and drop a swatch in, you can see that my gradient swatch has been added to the bottom of the list. Now let me click away from everything so that we can close our swatches palette, and let's go and see if we can apply that gradient to our second hill. I'm going to choose my paint bucket tool, and we're going to take a quick look at the options. Down here my paint bucket has an option called Lock Fill. Now what that will do is it'll lock the fill to the settings of a previous fill, and we don't want that in this case. I'd like to actually have the center point for my gradient a different center point than this one. So I'm going to turn off the Lock Fill setting, and we'll go over and drop the gradient onto our hill. Now notice where I'm placing the tip of the paint bucket tool. I'm going to put it right up at the top of the hill here, and when I click, that actually is the center point for where the light spot in my gradient is going to be set up. Our other hill looks pretty good, but the light spot down here doesn't really reflect what sunlight would do if it was rolling across this hill. So let's see if we can fix that. We actually have a special tool just for manipulating gradients, and it's located over here underneath the Free Transform tool. So if I click and hold down, I should see the tool menu pop up, and you can see that we have a gradient transform tool here. Our gradient transform tool allows me to go in and change the settings of how the gradient gets applied. Now I've got two radial gradients set up in here, so what I'm going to do is click on the hill, and that should pull up my gradient settings tool. Since this is a radial gradient, you're seeing a big round track in here, and I've got several different handles that I can use to adjust the way the gradient's applied to the hill. The first one is the center point. I could move this up just a little bit, and now I can kind of see the light area right at the top of the hill with darkness and shadow going down at the bottom. I also have a few other adjustments here that allow me to flatten this gradient. Here we can pull it down a little bit. We can also rotate the gradient and change its alignment a little bit. And we can use this final one to scale the gradient universally. And with this combination of tools, you can usually get exactly the gradient layout that you want. Notice we can just click on the other hill and do the same kind of adjustments here. I'll have to zoom out a little bit. For this one, I'm just going to scale it down just a little bit so that we see more of those dark edges, and adjust this a little bit higher on the hill, and that looks pretty good. You can see that that change in color gives us a lot more interest, and it actually creates fake depth inside of our drawing so that everything doesn't look quite so flat. I'd like to add a couple more gradients to my mountains and my river to add some depth to them as well, but we can just use linear gradients for those. So let me go back to my selection tool. I'll click on the river first, and we'll go back over to our color menu and mix up a linear gradient for the river. I'll start with a dark blue, and on the other side, let's go almost to a blue-black. That'll give it some nice depth. Now, notice the way the gradient gets applied. It's applied from left to right usually at the start, but I'd like this one to be top to bottom. So once again, I'm going to switch over to my gradient transform tool. And since we have a linear gradient this time, we have the same kind of handles, but they're applied in a little bit different way. I've got a handle that allows me to center the gradient. I can rotate the gradient. I think I want it the other way around. So the dark part's in the back. I can even tilt it just a little bit. And then we can use the last one to actually scale the start and stop point of the gradient. And there we're getting some nice color gradation as the river comes forward. We can do the same thing with the mountains in the back. First I'll select the mountains, and we'll mix up a brown-black color for that. We'll choose a linear gradient from the list, and then we'll choose kind of a nice starting brown color for one end. See, something like that, kind of a nice roundy brown. And for the other end, I want a kind of black brown. So I've already got it in the black ranges, so we'll just bring it down to the browns here, make it a little bit darker. And there we've got a nice black to brown gradient. Now I'd like to make sure that's applied, not left to right, but top to bottom again. So let me click away from everything, and we'll go up and choose our gradient transform tool once again. Now there you can see the left to right settings. And we'll just turn it around here and scale it down just a little bit and see if I got it the right way. It's a little bit upside down. I think I'm going to pull it around that other way again. And there we kind of have the black going to a nice lighter brown at the top. Again, just adding a little bit of depth to our scene.